So I'm Elizabeth Ward. I'm here with the Sierra Club John Muir chapter, which is the statewide branch of the Sierra Club, and we work on a slew of issues. We are also a member of the WISE Alliance, which is the Wisconsin Safe Energy Alliance, which is a coalition of organizations including Madison 350 and Sierra Club, as well as really local landowners who are concerned about the pipelines, who live right near the pipeline corridors. So the pipeline network in Wisconsin, Superior is a hub where the 5 pipelines Andy mentioned that come in from Canada sort of meet up in Superior and then basically become 5 different pipelines at that point. And Andy mentioned Alberta Clipper, which is the main pipeline we're looking at right now because they want to expand that to Keystone size, or 800,000 barrels per day, which would basically enable this need for additional what they call pipeline capacity through Wisconsin. So the pipeline network starts in Superior. There are 5 main pipelines that leave Superior. The first one is Line 5, which was in the video that they just showed you. It goes through northern Wisconsin, through the Upper Peninsula, and then under the Straits of Mackinac, which is what that video showed and what this picture shows from National Wildlife Federation. And then there are 4 pipelines that go down what's called the Line 61 corridor, which is what cuts through the heart of Wisconsin. These 4 pipelines, the first one is Line 13. This is actually a pipeline that travels from south to north, carrying the chemicals that are mixed with the tar sands in order to allow it to move through the pipeline. Once it gets to the refineries, they basically get that chemical out and they send it back to recycle it. It's pretty expensive. Then there's Line 6A. This carries tar sands mostly, but can carry other chemical or other forms of oil. Line 6A connects to Line 6B, which is the pipeline that ruptured in the Kalamazoo spill. So one way to think about that is that the oil that spilled in Kalamazoo traveled through Wisconsin, and they were just the unlucky ones that happened to have the pipeline rupture there, but it could have happened in Wisconsin, and we could have been the Kalamazoo. Then there's Line 14, which is a little bit smaller and mostly carries other forms of oil, though it can carry tar sands as well. This is the pipeline responsible for the rupture in 2012, if people remember that, in Grand Marsh in Adams County, where 17,000 tons of soil were contaminated on the local farm. They said it was exploding oil. It looked like an oil well that went off. And then Line 61 is the one that's getting the most attention because it was proposed last year to increase from what was 4,000 barrels per day to a whopping 1.2 million barrels per day. So this means tripling the amount of oil that's physically inside the pipeline. So they wouldn't expand the pipeline, they just increase the amount of oil to make it the largest tar sands pipeline in North America. And one way to think about this is the pipeline responsible for the Kalamazoo spill carried 200,000 barrels per day of oil. This is 6 times that size. So the amount of oil, the over 1 million gallons of oil that spilled out of that pipeline would leave this pipeline if a spill were to occur in 25 minutes. What's more, this path is especially concerning. I don't think there was anything intentional, but they could not have intentionally planned a worse path for this pipeline. So first it goes through a whole bunch of our waterways. This is a MapQuest map, but you can see it actually shows a pipeline path underneath the Wisconsin River. But it starts out right there on the shores of Lake Superior, which make up the Great Lakes network, of course, that provides drinking water for 42 million people. Travels south, crosses the St. Croix River in 3 different places. This is, of course, a national scenic wildlife river and responsible for a ton of of tourism and the economy up there. Through the Pentonwell Lakes and Wisconsin River in central Wisconsin, and then down here through the Rock River. So these are not only important as they provide drinking water for the local community, they provide the quality of life where most of those people recreate, but they also are huge for the local tourism economy. What's most concerning, and this I think most people know, is that the DNR basically first said that all they were going to do in order to permit this expansion was offer an air permit. They got thousands of comments and came back and said, we've decided not to do an air permit or any permitting whatsoever because in 2006 we looked at this pipeline already, and so there's no big difference. So we're not going to make any. We're not going to do any permit updates. Well, of course, if you look at their environmental assessment, they only looked at 400,000 barrels per day. So they didn't look at what the concerns were with increasing this pipeline to 1.2 million barrels per day. And the other piece is that most of this environmental assessment talks about the construction of the pipeline. It doesn't talk about what tar sands is. We had not had the Kalamazoo spill at that point, so we didn't know what that how tar sands acts in water. And so there's been no analysis of what would happen if there was a rupture in the Wisconsin River or in the Pettenwell Lakes or in the Rock River. So unfortunately, with this lack of any oversight, the local counties were responsible for providing just local construction permits for pumping stations, and all of those went through mostly unnoticed except for Dane County, at which point the Dane County Zoning and Land Regulation Committee looked at this and started asking questions. They weren't allowed to say yes or no to the station, but they were allowed to say, to put conditions on the permit. So what they did last Tuesday this was really groundbreaking, so I want to make sure to emphasize this, is they required a specific kind of pollution insurance. That means if a spill does occur, they can't say no to the pipeline and essentially stop a spill, but what they can do is say, if a spill occurs, we want insurance that ensures that it's going to be cleaned up. Now, we know that the damage is permanent, but at least the majority of the spill that can be cleaned up will be cleaned up with this requirement. So this was huge. Unfortunately, Enbridge knows that this was huge, and so there's now a push in the legislature to add a budget provision that basically revokes Dane County's right to zone, which would remove this ability. So I would urge all of you to contact your local representatives and ask them to vote no on any budget provision that would remove Dane County's right to zone. So unfortunately, aside from this huge win, but in the greater scheme for Line 61, Line 61 is now moving forward, and we are turning our attention towards the new pipeline Andy mentioned, what we believe will be called Line 66. They're also calling it the Line 61 Twin, which is basically another pipeline in the same corridor. Right now, they are surveying and talking to landowners, so if you are one or know any landowners, please come talk to us. They have an 80-foot easement right now is the stretch of their pipelines, and they're using every single inch of it, and they're looking to purchase a 200-foot easement, which means it's probably not going to be one pipeline. They've claimed that it's going to be a 530,000 barrels per day. This is from their stockholder presentation. They've, of course, talked very proudly about this to their stockholders. They have yet to talk to the DNR about this or let any local governments know about it. Though they claim it's going to be 530,000 barrels per day, if you look at the amount of oil that they're planning on having come into Superior and the amount of oil they're planning on having leave Flanagan, which is where these pipelines connect to before they go south to the Gulf, there's actually a 1.2 million barrel per day deficit. So there's a good chance that they'll say this is 530,000 barrels per day like they did with 61 and then come back in a couple years and want to increase it.
So that's 2.4 million barrels per day leaving Flanagan?
Well, no, because there's the two other pipelines, the Line 6A and 14. So I'm not going to do the numbers really fast, but I can show you the chart if you want to see them. So if we move on this quickly now, what this means is that there will be an environmental impact statement. It's a brand new pipeline. They're not going to be able to get away with not having one. And if we move now and start organizing, we'll be able to hopefully stop this pipeline. And so that's what we're here today to talk about, is how we can organize together. So far, there have been people that have come out of the woodwork across Wisconsin to join Wise Alliance and start organizing against this pipeline. These are Whitewater students this is actually Cassie, so she's not here, but we just clapped for her, who helped organize this tour. But this was back in November when UW Whitewater students discovered this pipeline. Line 61 was 2 miles away from their college, and they had no idea, and started organizing around it. Since then, local governments, counties have stood up. 6 counties passed resolution calling on an environmental impact statement for Line 61, and we're hoping they'll call for a similar resolution calling for an environmental impact statement on the new Line 66. And we're just hoping to band together. One thing we're doing is hosting landowner forums. So we're trying to educate landowners. A lot of them don't know. We've spoken to landowners who said they thought it was a natural gas pipeline. They don't know what it is or the risks, and we're hoping to talk to them before Enbridge convinces them to sign a document giving them rights to their land and gag orders so they can't ask any questions. So we have 2 forums coming up, one in Columbia County on May 14th and one in Spooner on May 14th, which is very up north, but we do want to plan them all along the line, so please let us know if you want to help in that. And then there will be a big rally on June 6th that you're going to hear more about later, and I'm out of time, so I won't talk about that. And with that, we are now going to turn it over to Mary Beth, who's going to talk a little bit more about the concerns of these pipelines before we break out.